In Utah, a single shot fired from a rooftop turned what should have been a routine campus event into national chaos. But the most shocking part of this story isn't just the crime itself. It's the revelation that followed, because investigators now say the key evidence didn't come from strangers or surveillance cameras. It came from inside Tyler Robinson's own home, from his roommate. Imagine this for a second. You're living with someone, sharing the same roof, splitting the same bills, and then suddenly you're faced with a decision. Do you hand over private messages to the FBI, knowing it could end your roommate's life as he knows it? That's exactly the dilemma that turned this investigation upside down. And for many, it left one haunting question. Was this betrayal, or was it justice finally catching up? Tonight, we're going deep into the case of Tyler Robinson, a 22-year-old with no criminal record, a young man who, by all outward appearances, was just another technical college student in Utah. Until the night of May 3rd, when a single gunshot would place his name in headlines across the country. Utah Valley University. Conservative commentator Charlie Kirk is speaking to students. The event is orderly, routine, even predictable. But then, from the rooftop of a nearby building, a shot rings out. Chaos spreads instantly. Students duck, security scrambles, and within minutes, this is no longer a college event. It's breaking news. Authorities immediately launch a manhunt. Forensic teams comb the rooftop. They recover a bolt-action rifle. Wrapped around it, a towel. On that towel, DNA. Tyler Robinson's DNA. A screwdriver is also found near the scene. His DNA appears there too. This is not circumstantial. It's direct contact, physical evidence tying Robinson to the weapon and the rooftop where the shot was fired. And yet, investigators quickly discover there's more. The spent bullet casings left behind aren't just discarded metal. They've been marked. Inscriptions scratched into their surfaces. Phrases like, "Hey fascist," "Catch," and "Bella Ciao." Messages that suggest anger, ideology, maybe even intent. Analysts would later debate the meaning. Was it political? Was it personal? Or was it some combination of the two? But here's where this case takes its most dramatic turn. Forensic science built the framework. But the breakthrough? That came from the digital trail Robinson left behind. A series of Discord messages that investigators say he sent directly to his roommate. In those messages, Robinson allegedly describes details that only the shooter could know. Where he left the rifle, how it had been wrapped, the towel, the hiding spot. Details that match the evidence recovered at the scene almost perfectly. And those messages didn't just magically appear in the hands of the FBI. They were handed over by the one person living with Robinson at the time, his roommate. This revelation stunned the public, because in one instant, the roommate shifted from being a silent figure in Robinson's private life to a central character in the investigation. For law enforcement, their cooperation provided the digital key. For the public, it raised questions about loyalty, betrayal, and what someone owes to justice when their closest companion becomes a suspect. But let's back up. Who exactly is Tyler Robinson? On paper, he was ordinary. 22 years old, a resident of St. George, Utah, nearly 3.5 hours away from Utah Valley University. He was enrolled in an electrical apprenticeship program at Dixie Technical College. Friends described him as focused on his studies, balancing school and work, and leading what appeared to be a quiet life. Nothing, at least outwardly, suggested the type of dramatic, violent act that would thrust him into the center of a national controversy. But when investigators pieced together the timeline, the gap between the quiet young man from St. George and the suspect accused of attempted assassination became impossible to ignore. It's important to note, Robinson didn't resist arrest. Once his name and image were released publicly, he surrendered to law enforcement in St. George, hours away from the shooting site. Reports suggest his own father urged him to come forward. That decision, to walk into police custody rather than be hunted down, paints a picture of someone who understood the weight of what was coming. Still, his surrender didn't come with a confession. Robinson has not fully cooperated with investigators. No clear statement of motive has been given, which means prosecutors are leaning heavily on the evidence, DNA, inscriptions, and, most critically, the digital trail. And that brings us back to the roommate. According to reports, This was a person who provided law enforcement with Robinson's Discord messages, conversations in which Robinson allegedly gave away details no outsider could know. The rifle, the towel, the hiding spot, the aftermath. The roommate has publicly denied any prior knowledge of the attack. They claim they had no idea what Robinson was planning, no warning signs that pointed to an impending shooting. They only turned over the messages after the fact, when it became impossible to ignore their importance to the investigation. But here's a debate. Should those messages have seemed alarming at the time? Should the roommate have raised concerns before the attack? Or is it only with hindsight that the messages appear as glaring red flags? For investigators, the answer doesn't really matter. What matters is that those messages now exist in evidence files, directly tying Robinson's words to the crime scene. And in the courtroom, that connection between digital confession and physical proof could be devastating for the defense. This is what makes the roommate such a complex figure. To some, they're a hero, someone who put aside personal loyalty to help uncover the truth. To others, they're a betrayer, someone who may have ignored the signs until it was too late. That duality is what makes this case so haunting. Meanwhile, the bigger question, the why, remains unresolved. What drove Tyler Robinson to allegedly carry out such an act? Was it ideology, a personal vendetta, a spiral of private struggles that spilled into violence? Authorities haven't provided a definitive answer. And until they do, the motive remains one of the most gripping mysteries of this story. Public reaction, of course, has been explosive. Supporters of Charlie Kirk are demanding the harshest possible punishment. They see Robinson as the face of a growing climate of hostility. Others are more cautious, waiting to see what emerges in court before drawing conclusions. And online, debates rage, not about whether the shooting was shocking, but about what it represents. Is this an isolated act by one disturbed individual? Or is it a symptom of deeper divides boiling beneath the surface of America's political and cultural life? One thing is certain. The involvement of the roommate has magnified the conversation. For some, it's proof that cooperation with investigators matters, that even private conversations can become the bridge to justice. For others, it sparks concern about privacy, loyalty, and how far law enforcement can go in using digital communications as evidence. Right now, Tyler Robinson sits in custody without bail, facing some of the most serious charges Utah law allows. He has not confessed. He has not explained himself. His silence leaves the evidence to speak for him, the DNA on the rifle, the inscriptions on the casings, and the messages on Discord. The case is still unfolding. Prosecutors are building their argument. The defense is preparing its strategy, and the public is left to watch and wait. At its heart, this story is about more than one night on a Utah rooftop. It's about trust, about betrayal, about how quickly an ordinary life can unravel into a national scandal. Tyler Robinson was once a name no one outside of St. George knew. Now, it's a name tied to a case that has left an indelible mark on both Utah and the nation. We know the how. We've seen the evidence. But the why, the reason behind it all, still hangs in the balance. And maybe, just maybe, the final piece of that puzzle lies in the very messages his roommate chose to reveal. So now the question is yours. Do those messages reveal Robinson's true intent? Or is there more that investigators haven't shown us yet? Comment below with your thoughts. And as this case continues to develop, remember, each new detail could shift the entire narrative. This is not just a Utah story. It's a national one, and its impact will be felt far beyond the courtroom. Stay tuned, because this story is far from over. A single gunshot cracked through the air at Utah Valley University. It was supposed to be just another night, another campus event. A crowd had gathered to hear conservative commentator Charlie Kirk speak, a moment of political theater in a divided America. But in seconds, it became something far more terrifying. Panic swept through the audience. A shot fired from a rooftop had turned a speech into a crime scene. That night, confusion reigned. Who pulled the trigger? Was this a targeted political act, or just a random burst of violence? Very quickly, investigators began following the evidence. And what they uncovered would shake not only the university community, but the entire nation. At the center of the storm stood Tyler Robinson, just 22 years old, an apprentice electrician, a technical college student in St. George, Utah. On paper, He looked like any other young man with a future to build. But prosecutors say appearances were deceiving, because DNA, digital footprints, and even strange inscriptions scratched into bullet casings began to weave a damning story around him. And then came the twist. The twist no one saw coming. The most critical piece of evidence, the one that prosecutors believe sealed the case, didn't come from detectives or forensic scientists or surveillance cameras. It came from inside his own home, from his roommate. Imagine that for a moment. The person you live with, the one who shares the same space, the same kitchen, maybe even daily conversations. That person suddenly turns over your private messages to the FBI. Discord messages that investigators now say reveal chilling details. Descriptions of a rifle, a towel, a bush where the weapon was stashed after the attack.